Hello, and welcome to another season of the Storied Arcs podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are beginning our spoiler-free intro episode to November for the month of November 2025. And this is a graphic novel, and I'm using... Four graphic novels. Gosh.
Yeah. Well, so we'll get into that. It was originally 3. It's listed initially as 3, and then it became 4. But yeah.
Oh, right, because I'm reading... I'm literally pulling that off of the synopsis for the first
Exactly,
one.
yes.
Which I'll go ahead and... So, hey, how about that? I'll read the synopsis right here at the top.
Sure.
And since that sets up the creative team, we'll just use that as a springboard into the creative team.
Sounds good.
Okay, so this is November, Volume 1, The Girl on the Roof. The lives of 3 women intersect in a dark criminal underground as fire and violent tears through their city over the course of a single day and night. They find that their lives are bound together by one man who seems to be the cause of it all. One night, one city, 3 women. November, the first in a sequence of 3, technically 4, novellas by Matt Fraction, Sex Criminals Hawkeye, Elsa Charretier, Star Wars Infinite Loop, with colors by Matt Hollingsworth, and exquisitely crafted lettering by cartoonist Kurt Ankeny. And you want to just go in that order of creators?
Sure.
I mean, I think those they probably have, just by the way they fall, heaviest to lightest in terms of, what we want to say about each one.
Probably so. But yeah, I'll start with the idea that, from that, initially the plan was it was 3 graphic novels, so these books were never solicited as single issues. This is something I think we'll discuss as we go through. Maybe we'll discuss a little on this episode. The idea of putting your material out in a completed story form is something we're seeing more and more. But this is one of the first where someone was like, we're going to put this out, and these are going to be standalone graphic novels. Because a couple years after November comes out, Brubaker and Phillips, who have been toying with this idea with some novellas in the criminal space, like My Heroes Have Always Been Junkies and things like that, they started doing the Reckless series, which were 5 standalone graphic novels. The team behind Monstrous, Marjorie Liu and Sana Takada, they had a new book out called The Night Eaters, which are 3 graphic novels, a 3-part trilogy released in graphic novels. But this was an early attempt at that, or example of that it could work. But yeah, so the first volume that you mentioned there, titled The Girl on the Roof, came out November 2019. And in between then and when the second book was supposed to come out, which was supposed to come out, I want to say in mid-March 2020. And unsurprisingly, that didn't happen. But by that point, it had expanded to 4. I think maybe because the story was maybe a little more expansive than they thought. But kind of regardless, kind of going into the second book, at that point it already shifted to 4 books. But that second book, because of the world being what it was in 2020, the second book, The Gun in the Puddle, ended up not coming out until July of 2020. So like about a 4-month delay. Of course, again, at that point everything was delayed. That's not on the creative team. That's on the world being on fire, or more on fire at that specific moment in time. And then from there, the books continue to come out, regularly. Volume 3, The Voice on the End of the Phone, came out in October 2020. And Volume 4, The Mess We're In, came out in February 2021. So they came out once we kind of got through that initial part of shutdown and distribution being all over the map for comics. The books got back onto a fairly regular schedule, and they all came out, without any other major delays, at least no creative delays. Nothing was delayed because we couldn't get it done on time, which is, the ordinary pretty darn reason. Good. When you're talking about, I want to see these books for like 80 some odd pages, 75, 80 pages of material. So you're talking about, that's roughly 3.5 issues worth of stuff. If you're excluding some of the extras and things like that. So you're talking about 3+ issues of material, round up to about 4, getting this stuff out in a complete story. But again, when you have the graphic, the OGN format, you're not bound by the story arc has to end after 22 pages. It can have as many chapters as it wants. You can break the story wherever you want, as long as the completed thing is a complete story. And so, seeing this story come out in this format, I think was a really cool and really exciting thing. And it's a risk too, because if that first one doesn't hit, then what do you do, right?
I mean, I think as a creator, you need a certain amount of clout and name recognition to
You
even
you
try
do.
to pull this off.
Exactly, which is why when people talk about this, they're like, "Well, Brubaker and Phillips did it," and folks are like, "Yeah, they've got 15 years, 20 years
Right,
of
yeah, call me back when you're
yeah,
Brubaker and Phillips.
of not just working in the industry but working together." Brubaker Phillips is a brand, and they can trade on that and be like, "Yeah, if we put this out, we know what our audience is going to be." And a lot of ways, The Night Eaters, that book from Marjorie Liu and Sana Takada, is very similar because Monstrous is incredibly popular. And Monstrous has its audience, and the two of them know that if we put our name on something, our audience is probably going to come with us, and they did. And those books were great. This here, there's a bit of a risk here. I mean, this book was really traded, and this is no offense to specifically, I would say to Elsa Charretier, is that this book was sold on Matt Fraction, because Fraction was the name. Charretier
For sure, yeah.
did not have. She was someone, as we'll get into, who didn't have probably the name brand recognition at the time this book came out, in terms of what she was known for. She wasn't known for kind of extensive interiors. She was brought in often as like kind of a guest artist for one issue, a special issue, kind of a one-shot thing and an ongoing story, someone you could go to for covers or variant covers, because her style is so distinctive. She didn't have the track record at the time of doing interior work. And so I think there was a bit of a little more of a risk in doing this book and putting it out there in this format, versus if this somehow had been serialized in single issue format and people could have seen the story and then bought into it, instead of saying, here's the first part of this story in total, and we're hoping you buy it and hoping you like it, and we're hoping you come back for the next two, which end up being the next three. There's a bit of a risk on that. So but yeah, ultimately I think it works out, and I think I don't know if it's a good trend or a bad trend. I like the fact that these are options now, that not everything, as much as I love the single issue and as much as I love that and want to support that, I like the idea that creators aren't bound by that anymore.
Well,
They never were.
I mean, it's a little bit
don't-
ahead of
they
the
don't feel they're
trend,
bound.
right? But
Absolutely, it was
starting
early
in
on.
COVID,
Yeah,
the number of trades started to go up and single issues went down. And
because folks can get in
someone,
the shop. Yeah,
right. Well, and someone that, and I think they were looking for longer form reading because they were stuck at home a lot more than they were used to.
that is true. That is true.
And a lot of non-comic people, I think, started dabbling in it. And
Because it looks like a book.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
but like if I want someone to get into comics, it's very rare I'm going to give them a single floppy issue.
yes.
Because it's 15, 20 minutes for them to read it. And then they might be like, what the heck? That's like, a half-hour episode of TV. Most people, when they sit down to watch a new show, like we talked about with Andor or something, you're going to sit for 3 hours and get through okay, which is what I did with the last show I watched, which was The Paper. It's like, I don't know, 10 episodes, and I sat down and watched the first 5 in one sitting to decide if I wanted the next 5. So I try to give people that option by giving them a trade and say
that is true. You're right. New readers are generally going to migrate from collected editions to single issues, which is obviously not the way the business was set up or understood the audience back in the day. It was all about you pull a random single issue off a spinner rack in a drugstore, and that's enough for you to want to keep reading and then go back and read what came before, right? That concept of every comic could be someone's first comic,
right? Which, but I also
Which
think
still holds
back
true.
in that day,
yes,
single issues were written in a much more episodic way,
without question. Yeah, something that we've talked about plenty on the show.
The Stan Lee illusion of change types thing.
Yeah.
Also, lots of anytime there were like the Marvel team ups, 2-in-1s, 3-in-1s, all that stuff was just like fodder for selling one shot issues. What If was probably the most extreme of that.
Yeah.
of
Just here's a
just like
self-contained story. Yeah.
it's a totally self-contained story. What if obviously is a fine line there as an example because it is predicated on you understanding what the non-what if version is and
Yeah.
then showing you the what if. But still, you could pick up, you could be like someone who's never read a Superman and you can read what if Superman landed in Russia?
Yeah.
And it's like, cool. I know enough about Superman from reading other stuff that,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. So,
but
so
anyway, comics have become much more serialized. Is what I'm saying. Like single issues.
100%, 100%. And again, this story is still serialized. It just serialized in a larger, oversized format. So I said there is a risk to that, but I like that creators feel that they have the freedom, especially with creator-owned work, to come out and be like, yeah, this is going to be. They're going to be complete graphic novels. They're going to come out every 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, whatever it is. And yeah, you're going to wait for it, but when you get it, you're going to get something significant. You're going to get something kind of worth your time waiting for and reading. So again, I think that's a great addition to also every Wednesday there are new books out there, and people that can pump out that product and also kind of the full complete story, the OGN type thing. I think it's great, and to give creators that kind of flexibility, and hopefully the market bears that out, that people are buying that and they're willing to pay for those things as well. But you are 100% right that this was an earlier kind of proof of concept of that in our current time. Going back in the past like 5, 6, 7 years, where we've seen a little more of the shift. November really was kind of an early test case for that. So yeah, going into this book here, I want to read a little bit from an interview that Matt Fraction gave that I found. He gave it to Entertainment Weekly back in July 2019, which was, I guess that would have been right as the initial solicitation for Volume 1 came out, and this was kind of the backstory of the genesis of this idea. It starts back in 2009. A police manhunt ended right in front of the comic book writer Matt Fraction's home, complete with cops, helicopters, and pointed guns. Fraction and his family were left to clean up the mess afterwards. When they were playing outside a few days later, his wife, noted comic writer Kelly Sue DeConnick, found a loaded gun that had been left in the bushes. That experience inspired Fraction's new graphic novel trilogy, which became I'm not going to say quadrilogy because that's the alien thing, but with Elsa Charretier. November follows, blah blah blah. That goes into the synopsis there. What Fraction says about the characters, the three women. He says one of them is a survivor, one of them is a good Samaritan, and the other is struggling against their own obsolescence. So this idea that he was playing with the idea of kind of what happens when you put ordinary, regular people into crazy circumstances. And what they've done here in the story is take these three women, these three disparate women in three different stories, and really distill it down into one night. Like, so this isn't a big sprawling story, and we do see a little bit through time, but the main narrative of the story happens across one night, and I always love movies like that too, like the all in one night movie, the all in one day movie.
Oh, I'm a huge
thing.
sucker for it, especially, yeah. I mean, the next level for me is when it follows like a real time clock.
Oh yeah. I mean,
and like
that's just 24 or what's the
well, but like the act structure of
is that one of the
so the one that comes to mind for me, and this is not exactly the same thing, but it's a 3-act play essentially, was the Aaron Sorkin script for Steve Jobs, where it's 3 different years, but each time it's like 45 minutes before he goes on stage for a product reveal.
Yeah.
And he has conversations with the same people for those 45 minutes before each product thing
at 3 different spots in his life.
Yeah. And it's just like, oh, that's so beautiful. Because I read the same biography that was based on. Never would have occurred to me or anyone else to structure it that way, to just be like, we're going to fudge reality a little bit. Like, these were all conversations that happened. They didn't all happen backstage, but to make it more like a play. I mean, like, that movie feels like an action movie, even though it's literally 10 people in the cast standing around talking. It's so ratcheted up and so good. But anyway.
But that's a trope I agree that I enjoy, and the idea of condensing it down, your story down, so there's a there's a claustrophobia to it, you know, that this is all happening, that everything feels like it's happening effectively in real time, you know, whether it actually is or not. The idea of this is all one day, you know, so you don't have these giant time gaps, and that the person you're following is the same person who you've been following this whole time, right? You know, that they haven't changed their perspective or anything like that. You know, because they are, you know, they're just kind of who they are from they were an hour ago in their time, but 10 minutes ago in your viewing time, you know? Right. So I think stuff like that is really, really cool. So,
well, and I much prefer it to the trope I always complain about, which is just random time jumps for no reason of like,
oh, sure.
Oh, I want something to land in this episode or in this issue or episode. So I'm going to do a flashback to when they were a kid and something similar happened. And then I'm going to reveal it in this same issue for a payoff. And it's like, no, you don't get credit for that.
Yeah. I mean, to do that, you've got to be really, really good. Like you've got to be really
It was
slick.
Actually my main complaint about going back to Daredevil season 1 on Netflix was, you know, it was a lot of stuff as him as a kid with Stick and stuff like that. That was the plot I found least interesting. And also they were setting up things in that to pay off later. And it's like, it would have been one thing if season 1 was like him as a kid and then it jumps into season 2 and you see him as an adult. You know, Arrow did the same thing. Like whatever he was dealing with on the island happened to be a close parallel. And it was just conveniently coming up. You know, at the same.
Amazing how that always happens. Yeah.
Right.
No,
so
I'm with you. I'm with you.
There is some beauty to that craft, but leaning on it too heavily and using too quick of a setup payoff. So I love
if that's
a
your whole
story
thing.
like November. Right. That's your whole thing. But like a story like November where it's like you have to know where everything is going from the beginning because you're telling this chronologically and it's self-contained and small.
Exactly. So yeah, I guess we should go into the creative team like we always do. Again, we'll start with Matt Fraction. If you have read comics in the past 10, 15 some odd years at this point,
big to any publisher.
You know Matt Fraction. If you do know him, you probably know him from Hawkeye that he did with David Aja.
I was just gonna say, why don't we just
eventually
do
with Annie Wu.
What's your top 3 Matt Fraction books personally?
I mean, it's Hawkeye, it's Sex Criminals that he did with Chip Zdarsky over at Image. And then, I mean, in terms of my favorites, it's a DC book, his first DC book, Superman's Pal Jimmy Olsen with Steve Lieber. But I
I never read that.
It's awesome. We'll get there. But I mean, he's from a superhero standpoint, he might have been Marvel exclusive at this point. I don't know, but I guess he probably was because he didn't do any DC work until only a handful of years ago. But you know, again, mainly known for Hawkeye with David Aja. Right before that, he did Immortal Iron Fist, which he co-wrote with Ed Brubaker, also with David Aja. So yeah, I guess we're going back almost 20 years at that point. I guess I shortchanged his career a little bit because that started in like 2006, I think. You know, he had done an event series, Fear Itself, with Stuart Immonen. He wrote Uncanny X-Men for a handful of years, like 2008 to 2011, Invincible Iron Man, Thor / Mighty Thor, Fantastic Four / FF, Punisher War Journal, Defenders, all of this from like 2006 to 2012, 2015. I guess 2012 is when he started Hawkeye, and that was kind of the last big thing he did, I think, at Marvel. And again, probably his most acclaimed. I mean, it was hugely popular, critically acclaimed. You know, the vibe of the Hawkeye television show, that version of Kate Bishop, the Kate Bishop's a character that started out, was created for the Young Avengers. The version that Fraction and Aja did, and then when the Hawkeye book split, and he was doing the Kate part of the story with Annie Wu, that version of Kate Bishop is now the canonical Kate Bishop. You know, like they kind of took what was started in Young Avengers, and that becomes kind of who she is. It's that defining for that character. So yeah, so much of this Marvel work for like a 10-year span. Again, the characters I listed off there, touching on effectively every major office, right? Maybe not writing in an Avengers book itself, but like Fear Itself was a big thing. X-Men, Hawkeye, Daredevil, Iron Fist, Fantastic Four, Thor. I mean, touching on doing everything and kind of being a go-to guy to put books out. He had so much traction there at Marvel. And before I jumped to DC, I would go to his Image stuff, the other stuff he's well known for. I mentioned Sex Criminals with Chip Zdarsky. Again, probably his second most famous book after Hawkeye, I would imagine. I've mentioned before, probably when we did Umbrella Academy, he did Casanova with Gabriel Ba.
Right.
And he was working
That's
with
one
Gabriel.
you and I have kicked around more
We've
than
talked
once.
about that. We've talked about that. He was doing that with Gabriel Ba until Gabriel Ba left to do Umbrella Academy, and so Gabriel Ba's twin brother Fabio Moon came in and did the rest of the book with Fraction. So he didn't really lose the style, and that book was literally kind of kept in house. He's got some other great books at Image. Odyssey, ODY-C with Kristen Ward, kind of a sci-fi space story. Adventure Man with Terry Dodson is a recent, I think still ongoing, that they put out like 3 or 4 oversized issues per volume. That's like a nod to like old school pulp serials. Did a book with Howard Chaykin called Satellite Sam. A really fun book called The Five Fists of Science with Steven Sanders. It's a silly book. It's serious, but it's silly. It's a story of how Mark Twain and Nikola Tesla tried to solve the world, try to achieve world peace through technology, aka superior firepower. So like Mark Twain, Nikola Tesla, Edison's a character in this book. It's a wild, strange book, but it's super, super fun. That I don't think a lot of people have read.
If that came before, I could probably look at it. That's 2006.
What
Before,
the Prestige or?
Well, no, I was going to say his Iron Man run. And it was before his Iron Man run.
It was, yeah.
But I'm like, I feel the DNA of that in his Iron Man run, which I have read, but I've not read the Five Fists of Science.
Yeah.
But he loves the number 5 because his first Iron Man run was the very famous, the 5 Nightmares.
Yeah, it's a fun book. And a lot of those Image things, were being written concurrently with his Marvel stuff, because he didn't do DC. The reason he came to DC at all, I have to assume, kind of after his Hawkeye run, his exclusive contract with Marvel, which I'm assuming he had, kind of lapsed. He didn't re-up with them. He started doing a lot of television work, which we'll get into. Him and his wife Kelly Sue DeConnick. He was still doing his Kratos stuff at Image, but what brought him over to DC, he came over with Brian Michael Bendis. Bendis ended his like 20-year run exclusive at Marvel, came over, big deal. He was doing Superman and he was doing Action Comics. Bendis was writing both of those, and he brought along some of his kind of Portland collective, because that's where all these creators live. He got Greg Rucka to come back and Greg Rucka did a Lois Lane book with Mike Perkins, which is awesome. And Rucka obviously has done plenty of work at DC, but he kind of comes in and out with them. Seemingly like works for a while, ends up having a bad experience, leaves, comes back. I think he's writing books there now again still, so he's always in and out. But he wrote this Lois Lane book, I mentioned that book, this Jimmy Olsen book, Superman's Friend Jimmy Olsen, that Fraction did with Steve Lieber, is a wildly absurd and incredibly funny book. It is so much fun. And according to what Bendis would say, like him and Greg Rucka and Fraction, they would like hang out at Bendis's house, like outside in his porch, like with a fire pit, and just like talk about what they were doing. Cause they were all in the Superman office now. Bendis went over and brought all these guys with them, and they would just talk about the Superman stories and kind of what they were building and kind of how they were connecting or not connecting with what they were doing. But like, that's what it took to get Fraction over to DC. And that book went, I think, 12 issues. I think the Lois Lane book was also 12 issues. Those were like maxi series. So that was like 2019, 2020 that Jimmy Olsen book ran. And, as we're speaking right now, as we're recording this, Fraction just started his run on Batman. He is the Batman writer with artist Jorge Jimenez. I think a couple issues are out right now. I think 2 issues are out right now as we're recording this, which, kind of a big deal.
By the time this drops, it'll surely be 3.
I don't know what the schedule is, but he has just started, but it's a big deal. He has the, you can juice the numbers a little bit, but he's the fourth person to write a Batman #1. Now have three of those come in the last 15 years? Sure, they have, but it's still, it's still a #1, and it's still a big deal to be the writer of Batman. It's like it's a big deal to be a writer of the writer of Superman, Amazing Spider-Man, whatever it is. These are the marquee characters, and so so kind of as Kurt, his focus right now pretty much is being the Batman writer, which is pretty cool. So there had been some talk too, like when he came back, quote unquote, even I'm doing it, when he was announced, I'll put it that way, as the writer for Batman, there are a lot of people who were like, yeah, where's Matt Fraction been? What's he been doing? And, he hasn't been doing a lot of superhero work, but again, he had been doing his creator-owned stuff at Image. Adventure Man was a book that had been out, that had been coming out, and he had been doing a lot of stuff on television. A handful of years back, him and Kelly Sue, they formed a production company called Milk-Fed Criminal Masterminds. They had a deal to adapt both of their creator-owned work, I think initially at Universal and then currently with Legendary. And, he spent some time, Matt Fraction did, being the co-creator and showrunner of Monarch: Legacy of Monsters, which was on Apple TV. That's the TV series that ties into the MonsterVerse of, the Godzilla versus Kong stuff. Those movies are very silly, but the show I thought was really good in terms of kind of like telling an episodic story kind of around the entity that is Monarch. They had a really cool thing where like Kurt Russell was cast as the character, and in flashbacks they cast his son Wyatt Russell, who obviously looks just like his dad, to play the younger version of the character. And like sometimes they would do like the screen dissolve between younger and older version, and you're like, oh yeah, you don't have to do any special effects because he just looks like that. It's a really fun. I enjoyed it a lot. It's a lot better than some of like the Godzilla versus Kong movies, which I love, and I've seen all of them. And they're absurd and silly, but like the Monarch show was really good. It was really high quality, really done. I don't think it has another season, which is too bad. But he was a co-creator and showrunner of that. He was also a consultant on Hawkeye over on Disney Plus. Obviously, that book was kind of based on his work that he did with David Aja.
If you watch the end credits and you don't think David Aja had a hand in influencing the show, then
of course, the credits, the logo that they use, the font, all of that's pulled directly from their run.
I just really wanted to see Jeremy Renner as like slumlord
he's not a slumlord. He owns the building, but he's not jacking a rent on people.
A regular landlord. Yeah.
It
wouldn't work with what the direction the MCU had already taken.
It would not.
And they did the absolute most they could to pay homage to that story while keeping continuity of the MCU intact.
I think people kind of crap on that show, and I don't know why. Because I think given what they had done with Renner's Hawkeye, which is obviously not in any way relevant to the Hawkeye in the Fraction Aja run, but finding a way to bring some of that tone, because there's a bit of whimsy.
The fact that you bring the Tracksuit Mafia in, and they're like talking about, it was like Imagine Dragons concert or something. It was some of the stuff had like a shelf life to it, but so do comics.
Like, and to find a way to get that characterization of Clint and merge it with that version of Kate Bishop they brought Haley Steinfeld in for, who was perfect in that role, to make that work and have some of the silliness and have some of the whimsy and weirdness, and yet also still have the serious moments that the book has, because it mixes all that together. So they did what they could, and I think having Fraction there and
I think that's important.
Whatever consultant means,
That's my like one, like my pitch for Fraction is that he brings like a lighthearted fun and whimsy to comics, but is still primarily focused on really good storytelling. Like it's not, and this is not disrespectful. This is just my classification. It's not like a lot of like Kyle Stark's work, which is like fun and lighthearted kind of for its own sake. And it's like, oh, that was fun. That was charming.
Well, and I think you see that really in a book like Sex Criminals, which is so absurd, so over the top, so ridiculous. But that's a character study. Like that book's about those two people and what they it's not about what they can do and the silliness of the situation. It's really about those characters, those two people trying to connect and what their place is in the world. And yeah, there's a lot of character stuff. And I think Fraction is really good about that because there is a lot of the stuff has this like kind of silliness to it. And again, if you read that Jimmy Olsen book, which I recommend everyone do, that book is so silly, but it's so well written. It's so good. There's so many great moments in that. It's an absolutely fantastic book. So, and there are a ton of other stuff that we didn't mention about Fraction. Again, he has spent a huge chunk of the last 20 years being, again, one of the most prolific writers. You have probably read something by him. And the fact that he's doing Batman now, just again, he never really left comics. It would just seem that way. But the idea that he's back on a major book, like the book, like Batman is still what the comic industry bases its sales on, like you sold X amount of versus. So that is still the gold standard, it's still the measuring stick of what of single issue sales. So the idea that he's back in that spotlight at that level now, I think is really cool because
you had mentioned like him getting a number one, and it's like, honestly, like I think most writers don't even care about that. It's whether you get Batman or not. It's like,
yes, yeah,
and I think like a writer who I love and was excited about was like Josh Williamson.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was announced that he was taking over after Tynion, and it turns out he was just pinch hitting for like, he just had to shoehorn, I don't know, like 5 to 7 issues in there. And I was like, why would he do that? And then I was like, oh yeah, because literally any writer will say yes to any amount of the main Batman run they can get.
And you just kind of glossed over also James Tynion IV the same way. Tynion has written plenty of Batman stories. He wrote Batman Eternal. He co-wrote that. He wrote Detective for a while. Yeah. But the idea of writing, and I think Tynion said this because he was announced picking up after Tom King's run. I think it says something like that too. It's like, it's one of those things. If you grow up in superhero comics, everybody's got a Batman story. Everyone's got a Spider-Man story. Everyone's got a Superman story. It's that sort of thing. If you grow up in Western comics, and
I think I brought this up months and months ago when what's his name, the current Saladin,
Saladin Ahmed,
when he started writing Daredevil, his letter in the back of the first issue, he elevated Daredevil to that level character of like, oh, everybody in comics has a Daredevil story they want to tell, and I was like, I think that makes you, the fact that you think that means you're gonna be a good Daredevil writer.
So here's the thing.
I'm not sure he's that level.
I actually think he might be, even though he's not for me personally. Daredevil has a history now, has a following. I think because of the lineage, because people like Frank Miller, Ed Brubaker,
and the Senti.
There is a lineage of writers on the title. So I think for writers and a lot of creatives, it's maybe less about the prestige of the character, but whose names were on the issues that you bought when you were growing up, and when you see the people that have written those stories, you're like, well, now my name is on the list with them. I am now a Daredevil writer. I am now a Batman writer. I'm a Spider-Man. I wrote that title. I think that stuff matters to creatives because this is the stuff that they read that inspired them. And so just to have your name on a list with those people that are, like luminaries in the field, in the industry, I think that stuff definitely matters. And Fraction is one of those guys. And so for him to now put his stamp on Batman going forward, super cool. I'm super excited for that. So again, as I mentioned at the top, this book initially, like if you're picking this up, you're seeing Matt Fraction's name and you probably know who he is, and you might not know who Elsa Charretier is, because at this point she had been in the industry, like in the US industry, Western industry, about 4 or 5 years, hadn't done a lot of ongoing stuff. I believe her first US work was an issue of Cowl, the book written by Kyle Higgins and Alex Siegel, with main artist Rod Rice. She did issue number 6, which was a flashback issue. It's a standalone kind of one-shot flashback issue. Weirdly, on a side tangent on that, when Cowl got collected, the volume 1 was issues 1 through 5, and volume 2 was issue 7 through 12. And issue 6, the standalone, was never included in a trade. And I was talking to me and some other people at a show talking to Kyle Higgins about this, and he explained why that was. There was some reason why that couldn't be collected in trade. I can't remember what it was, but because Kyle was brought into the Massiverse retroactively, the stuff he's doing with Radiant Black and all that stuff, there was supposed to be like a Cowl compendium coming out, and it's going to be included in that. But for whatever reason, this one-shot issue that Elsa Charretier had done was not included. You could only get the story in single issue. And this kind of became what she was known for a while, because her art style is so distinct, and kind of and so different than kind of your traditional what you would see in mainstream comics. She was kind of the perfect person to come in and be like, like we just talked about with the Bunker, right? That one shot issue that moves our story the move story to the future. You bring an artist whose style is completely different because you want to give a different feel, different vibe for that issue. Chartier's art style is perfect for that because there is this kind of like retro feel to it. This kind of I don't want to say like golden age, but it has it. When you look at it, there's a throwback feel to the way that she draws characters and all of that. So it ends up being perfect for just the visual look of, oh, A, this is different, and B, I immediately believe I'm in an older time period. And so she could come back and do those kind of guest issues. She did it with Cowl. She did it with Department of Truth. Also weirdly, issue 6, the James Tynion book, with Martin Simmons, that came much later, but it served the same kind of function, but kind of after that issue of Cowl, I guess her story really into US comics was this book she did with her partner, Pierre Collinet. They're both French. They had this book they were trying to pitch called The Infinite Loop that I guess got rejected by like every publisher in France. So they put it up as a Kickstarter, and it got funded and then some. And that funding was enough for the two of them to go to the following year's New York Comic-Con. Like they just paid the way to go to Comic-Con and just started talking to people and pitching the book to the point where IDW ended up buying that book, and putting it out and eventually getting a second volume that the two of them wrote together. But like, that's kind of how it starts. And her art gets out there. People start seeing it. She does a book called Windhaven with George R.R. Martin of Song of Ice and Fire fame, Game of Thrones. Windhaven was a book that Martin had done.
Can't wait to see how it ends.
Well, you know what? We know how it ends. The show called it.
No, I'm talking about Windhaven.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. So
is it a one shot? OGN?
So Windhaven was a novel that he had done with another fantasy writer named Lisa Tuttle. They had done like in the late 70s, early 80s. It was like a collab where they each wrote like different parts of story and put them together. I want to say it was like 2 or 3 volumes as a prose book way back in the day. They decided to get it adapted into an OGN. I think it was adapted. I think Tuttle did the adaptation, but Martin was involved. But Charretier got that job as far as reported, I believe, because Martin saw her artwork online and was like, that's cool. I like that. And reached out and contacted her. And that's how she ended up getting this book. So like, by being out there, it's circumstance that finds a way. And, kind of from that and just doing more stuff, she ended up doing a lot of stuff. Again, most stuff you're going to see, a lot of covers, right? A lot of variants, because people love her art style. I love it. I think I've said before multiple times, my favorite artist of all time in comics, of all time, never to be replaced, is Darwin Cook. He is number one. Rest in peace to an absolute genius as far as I'm concerned. And for the longest time, I only ever owned one art book. I owned the DC art of Darwin Cook. It's a gorgeous, big, oversized, beautiful book. During the pandemic, during the shutdown in 2020, when a lot of artists were putting stuff out there, especially creator-owned stuff through Kickstarter, try to, get some revenue in, Elsa Charretier was putting out a second art book. She had put one out like a year earlier, and in 2020 she put out a second one. I gave to that one and added on the first art book, so I now own 2 art books. Darwin Cook and Elsa Charretier, because I love her art so much. And there's a lot of influence. If you know Darwin Cook's work and you're not familiar with Charretier's stuff, when you see it, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, I see the connection there, which is funny because I've heard her say in interviews that when she started out, people would be like, oh, there's a lot of Darwin Cook in this. I see that. And at the time, she had never seen or read anything by Darwin Cook before, early on in her career.
Wow.
And people kept saying it to her. And so she went, I think she then picked up DC The New Frontier, which is one of the kind of great magnum opuses in Big Two history, as far as I'm concerned. She picked that up and read it, was like, oh, yeah, I see it. And started then consuming more of his stuff. And then after the fact, seeing how he did story and layout and character, all this stuff, it then started to influence her work that was already kind of naturally similar. So you kind of get that kind of feedback loop. So you see a lot of Darwin Cook, you see a lot of Bruce Timm, if you know Batman the Animated Series. She's talked very glowingly about the work of Tim Sale, which is very different in style. But when Tim Sale passed a few years ago, she wrote and did a beautiful video essay on kind of the inspiration that The Long Halloween had on her. It's a gorgeous. She has a YouTube channel that she posted to for a while, but there was a beautiful thing about Tim Sale on there if you want to go check that out. But you can see some of those influences there. And so from there, she started getting a lot more work. She did a ton of stuff over at IDW, which had bought Infinite Loop, on Star Wars, the Star Wars Adventures line, which was a line after Marvel had purchased Star Wars and started putting out comics again. IDW had kind of their all ages line, like it was Marvel Action and Star Wars Adventures. They were kind of all ages stories. I guess they're canon. I'm not sure how that works with them, but they're really fun. Really, she worked as an artist and a writer on those. She also did a little miniseries called Forces of Destiny, which focused on some of the women characters of Star Wars. She did the Princess Leia issue specifically, but she also did variant covers for all 5 of those, that little miniseries, and they, with her art style, absolutely gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. In terms of kind of mainstream big 2 superhero stuff over at Marvel, her main work that she's done interior stuff on is The Unstoppable Wasp, with writer Jeremy Whitley. That's Nadia Van Dyne, who is the second or third Wasp. I'm not quite certain. The Van Dyne Pym Ant-Man Wasp family is a little weird, but Nadia Van Dyne is a newer version of a Wasp that they had introduced, and she was the artist on that miniseries.
Never read a single issue of.
Yeah,
my Ant-Man knowledge comes from the MCU, which I know. Well, that and podcasts where they explain it's weird that they kind of started with Scott Lang, but they made it work, and yada.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. I forget. It's
kind of next
the Van
generation,
Dynes, the
right?
Langs. It's a whole lot of stuff going on there. But she was artist on that. Over at DC, she did an arc of Starfire that was written by Amanda Conner and Jimmy Palmiotti. Kind of a second story arc on that Starfire one shot. They also brought her in at the end of their being Conner and Palmiotti. She did an issue, I think the final issue of their Harley Quinn run. I think their final arc on that Harley Quinn, I think each issue was drawn by a different artist. And so after working with Charretier on Starfire, they brought her in. She did a Harley Quinn book on that. She co-wrote with Colonnay, her partner, this book called Super Freaks, over which was a digital first book, maybe digital only over at Comixology. So she had done some stuff like that. Her biggest credits, I think, to date, probably in terms of number of issues, is a book that maybe people know about now, which is Love Everlasting, which was it's a big deal at the time because that was Tom King's first fully creator-owned book. I think Sheriff Babylon is technically creator-owned, but it depends on what that contract is like over at Vertigo. But his first Image book was is Love Everlasting. This book that King and Charretier worked together on. Started on Substack when that was a big thing. It's moved over to Image. 15 issues are out. They have said it's supposed to go 30 issues, but it's been about a year now since the last issue came out. So I don't know what the status of that is because she's had other things that she's worked on. But in terms of Love Everlasting, the third volume, which collects the last arc that was published, like just recently came out after like, almost a year from the last issue. So the fact that that trade's coming out maybe means it's coming back at some point. I don't know. I hope so. It's a wonderful book. It's super weird and trippy and awesome. But I really hope that does come out at some point. She also has a book, and this is important for who she worked with. I think it's a one-shot book called Room Service that she did with Jamestown and the Fourth, and again her partner Pierre Collinet. It's a prelude story to a short film that they made. The film was written by Tynan, it was directed by Collinet, and Charretier did the storyboards for. So like they put a comic out and they released a horror short film, and she's done so much work since then with Tynan. I mentioned doing a spot issue of Department of Truth. I want to say every book since that Tynan has put out, every series, which as we've talked about Tynan before, is like a dozen books going on at the same time.
Right.
Charretier has contributed some
always
sort of
a variant cover. Yeah.
Yeah. She always has a variant out there. She's done it because she's someone that I think clearly vibes with Tynan, and he loves her work. So anytime I see her name on a variant cover, if it's not like a crazy insane ratio cover, because some of them are, or some of them are exclusive to like the Tiny on a web store and things like that, if it's open order, I'm gonna get it because I love her work. The last book I'll mention is a book she has with James Tynan that I think is supposed to still be coming out. It's over at Distillery, which is this new creator-owned, oversized premium format publisher. Where the books come out,
sitting right by my desk.
Yeah,
it's really pretty.
The book is called The City Beneath Her Feet. The first issue came out. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. And as we're recording right now, the second book is scheduled to come out sometime in about a month. And
they're
the
like
issue,
$10 for a floppy. I mean, they're oversized.
They're magazine size. They're oversized premium format. Their Distillery has a bit of an issue. I just
assumed they do what November has done.
Yeah.
Like, and just say like, we're going to give you more story. We can make a magazine size or whatever, but they're just going to be OGNs or, they're $15 instead of $10 single issues. But
I want to say they're probably like $8 or $9, I think, for those single issues, because they are oversized. They are magazine size. But Distillery has had some issues with their books being delayed and taking a long time in between issues. But that's supposed to be a 3-issue series. Only one has come out. Eventually, when they all come out, it'll be gorgeous. The first issue was super cool, super awesome, but we just haven't gotten any more because, don't know the reason why. Have no idea why it's been delayed, but that is technically an ongoing book in which she is the series regular interior artist. So I don't know what's going on with that so much, but we'll see when that book eventually does finally come out at some point. Because you're right. Maybe they do just give up and be like, you know what? Here's the whole story. It has chapters in it because that's what it was supposed to be. But maybe they just say, here's a deluxe hardcover for the whole thing and be done with it. Who knows? And if they do that, I'll buy that too. So
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, that is Charretier. So one thing I find interesting that I've heard her say in interviews is that she doesn't like coloring her own stuff, especially interiors, because she doesn't think she's good at it. And so she's more than happy to kind of cede that over to other colorists. And for many projects that she's done, especially recently, she has worked with Matt Hollingsworth, she may have started working with on November. I don't know. Hollingsworth also does her stuff at on Love Everlasting. Actually, you know what? He did her issue of Department of Truth. So he's worked with her before, and they're kind of a really, really great team. Hollingsworth has done a ton of stuff. He's he's a colorist. He's a name you'll see on a ton of Marvel and DC stuff. Specifically with Fraction, he colored Hawkeye and Immortal Iron Fist. So that's two works with Fraction and David Aja. He's a colorist on Alias / Jessica Jones with Brian Michael Bendis and Michael Gaydos. He's also covered, Spider-Man, X-Men, Daredevil, Thor, Captain America, Guardians, Punisher, Iron Man. He's done so much stuff at Marvel. I believe he was Marvel exclusive for a handful of times in that period, like 2010, 2012, 2013 or something like that. He was Marvel exclusive for a long time. Because prior to that, he had done a whole lot of DC work. He was the original colorist on Preacher when that started over at Vertigo. Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon. He was the colorist on the Catwoman run that was started by Ed Brubaker and Darwin Cook. He is the colorist. I want to say the regular colorist whenever Sean Gordon Murphy does a book. Any of the stuff that he does, like the Batman White Knight series. I
was going to say, I read all the White Knight stuff.
All that stuff there. I want to say Hollingsworth generally colors Murphy's interior art. He's worked with Quick Botchlow coloring Death, Time of Your Life, which was a little miniseries spinoff out of Sandman. And kind of recently he's been doing the Gotham by Gaslight spinoffs, kind of the expansion of that world. Those books are being drawn by Leandro Fernandez, and Hollingsworth is doing the color on that currently over at DC. I mentioned Love Everlasting.
Probably won't surprise you. I'm sitting back and waiting to hear about that one because I'm like, I love Gotham by Gaslight, but leave it alone. Like, don't let it be.
It's still called Batman : Gotham by Gaslight M dash something, but it expands the world. It's bringing in full Justice League, and it's kind of doing the whole Elseworlds thing of like, we're bringing in all the Justice League characters from this era, from what this world would be. They're fun. They're cool books. Leandro Fernandez is an artist that I love. Old Guard, American Carnage, things like that. Great artist. So I for me at least, I love it for that. Over at Image, I mentioned Love Everlasting and that Department of Truth issue with Elsa Charretier. Definitely other books by Sean Gordon Murphy like Chrononauts and Tokyo Ghost. Really great book, Witches, little miniseries by Scott Snyder and Jock. He colored that. We Stand on Guard, a probably lesser known Brian K. Vaughan book with Steve Schroeke on art. I think he's colored a lot of Jerome Opeña stuff, specifically Seven to Eternity, which is a kind of fantasy book that Opeña did with Rick Remender. And a book, I don't know if you've read, Little Bird.
Oh yeah.
Little Bird.
Beautiful
And kind of
book.
and then another book, Precious Metal, which is sequel, follow-up, set in the same world. They're connected, but that, I think Ian Bertram, I think, is the artist on that. I actually don't have it written down, unfortunately. That's my bad, but Hollingsworth colored that as well. So again, he's a guy that just works everywhere you see his stuff. And if you know those books and know those artists, like, I mean, Sean Gordon Murphy could not be any different in terms of style than
Right.
Elsa Charretier. You know, Murphy is very, very kind of sharp and angular. It's very kind of very bold and very loud as the style is. A lot of Charretier's work is very kind of muted and not like desaturated, you know, but like, you know, it's definitely flatter in color. It's not going to have as much dynamism to it in terms of what's kind of being presented on page. So he's just, you know, he's super versatile. And I think he colors Charretier's work beautifully, and clearly she likes how it ends up looking because she works with him so much. I'll mention real quick, Ryan Hughes. He's not, you know, he's the designer on this book. He's done a lot of stuff. He works as an artist and a writer and I think a letter and all the stuff throughout comics, but he is the designer kind of the logo and all the stuff with November, kind of well known in that space, doing that kind of graphic design work for comics. And then finally is the letterer, Kurt Ankeny, who we mentioned a little bit on top. He is known as a cartoonist and a painter, doing his own stuff, not kind of mainstream comic work where he'd be published by Marvel or DC or anything like that, but he does a lot of his own cartooning and illustration and things like that. And they got him on here just to do letters, and they are hand lettered. And it looks gorgeous in the book. We'll talk a little about next week. Some of it can be a little hard to read, some of the cursive, the stylistic choices and all that. But when you know that it's hand lettered, and the way it looks on the page, it looks so cool. And in terms of, like, you know, major credited work, that's pretty much it. Like, he's not a letterer by trade. You know, other creators aren't calling him up to be like, hey, can you letter my book for me? So the fact that they got him to do this, I'm guessing probably a pre-existing relationship with someone, maybe Fraction or someone like that, to come in and just do hand lettering for these books is a pretty cool get. And again, the end result is just stunningly beautiful on the page.
Yeah. And that's a lot of range too. I mean, I know
It is, yeah.
colors have to be a little bit more chameleons than even artists have to
Mhm.
be, but like Little Bird is a totally different vibe than
Oh yeah,
yeah. I
yeah.
mean,
Then
it's
Batman White Knight, you
exactly
know.
yeah.
Then Love Everlasting, you know, or and even going back to Preacher, early days of Vertigo, like it's a completely different style, completely different look, all of that. So the stuff that Hollingworth can do, getting someone of his talent, and then getting someone who isn't a letterer by trade. Now, obviously, Kurt Ankeny cartooning his own stuff, right? That means he's doing all of it, so he is lettering his own stuff. But to get a guy like that just for lettering, to bring in like just for such a specific task and have him do it in all these different styles, as we'll get into when we get into the book, it's a pretty incredible team. That you look back on now, yeah, that someone like, especially I think someone like Elsa Charretier, who is much more well known now. Not saying that like Love Everlasting broke her into the mainstream. I think honestly, I think her work on November really brought more eyes to her doing this style of book. And because for a long time, I want to say she was almost pigeonholed into what she was doing on Cowl and on Department of Truth. It was like, hey, we need an artist to come in and break up the style because we got this cool idea for a one-shot story, you know? And so who is someone we can get that's visually distinct and different and interesting, that, you know, that fits the vibe? Oh, I know, Elsa Chartier, you know,
Yeah.
get her in there. And it works so well. But again, she kind
It's
of
a
got
hard
pigeonholed.
corner to round once you.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's a hard corner to get out of. If you're like, oh, you're the
Yeah, that's
person
what I
that
mean. Like to round the corner.
Oh, round
into,
out of. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're
Yeah.
the person. You're the person that does the special one shot issue. You know, and she's so much more than that. But she's also really good at that too. So the fact that she is, you know, did November, this long form story over, you know, 4 full graphic novels, and then doing Love Everlasting, doing a monthly serial floppy and getting it out there. You know, she's a name now that more people know. And so yeah, she could then launch a book with James Tynion over at Distillery and do the oversized magazine format in The City Beneath Her Feet. So getting to see her do more stuff and do more work outside of just doing cool covers. You know, she's someone that, yeah, if I see her name on a book, I'm in, because I love her style so much, and we will definitely get into that when we get into the book next week.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anyone? Oh, Kurt.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. We got everybody.
Yeah, that's everyone. Yeah.
Um,
Covered everyone on the credit.
oh, right,
yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even the
Even the
little
designer.
bit
Yeah.
design,
Ryan Hughes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, you know, we've talked to. I don't think we've ever recorded an interview, but there was one designer that I had talked with. Maybe it was the guy who got the design credit for like Descender. And he had like a ton of stuff, and I was like, "What is your job?"
Yeah.
Like, because it's different, like on
It is.
project
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
project.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Because
it's kind of like being a producer on a movie. It's like,
yeah. Yeah.
you know, you could have been intimately involved. You could have been in the room
Mhm.
when they conceived the thing. You
Yeah.
could have just been picking, you know, advising, you know, paper and ink and things like that for the production of the physical
Yeah. Yeah.
issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a whole range of you could have just designed the logo, the word
Exactly.
November
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
front cover. Like
Exactly.
there's
Yeah.
so much stuff.
And so many levels there. Yeah. But you know, for that, I mean, he's listed on their credits page at the end there. So in this case, I think he did a lot of work in terms of kind of not just the design of the like the logo, as we say, but like, you know, these are coming out and like the hardcovers are gorgeous. They're beautiful in terms of their look and feel and everything like that. So I think he did a lot of work on the production side as well. I get the sense that he helped them a lot with just how the book looks and feels on like the actual printed material. So yeah, you're right. That job title can vary between, you know, the highest level, just like here's some ideas for a logo, to like probably the most micromanaged level of like helping with you know, page layout,
help them cut
design.
beats. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, who knows there. So, but this book I think is just visually, when you look at it, it's absolutely gorgeous, from the art, the line work, the colors, the lettering, and all that stuff. And that's before we get into the actual story that they're telling, which is again this 3 different mainly three different stories that kind of weave in and out, and kind of the jigsaw puzzle that Matt Fraction has set up, and seeing how these stories merge and come together. Again, the understanding that it's three different stories of three different women, but you're actually reading one story, and kind of seeing him tiptoe around and navigate through that is a very cool exercise. But again, before you read a word, just on the page, it looks so beautiful. It looks so beautiful. And so it's one reason why I love this book so much. So
Yeah. And this book, I will note, is readily available.
Should be, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
your comic shop can still order it. Obviously,
Should be in
Amazon
print. Yep.
Comixology, I checked, our library does have it, so
Mhm.
it's available that way as well. And I think
And
I
it's,
had
it's
mentioned in a previous, maybe this was something else I was talking about, but the website In Stock Trades, which is sometimes my go-to if it's not in stock at my store,
yep. Yep.
they are actually, this may not be true by the time this drops, but I think it will. They are actually running a creator spotlight on Matt Fraction, and all his books are at least 43% off.
Probably because of Batman.
Um, they just kind of cycle through, I think, whenever they get backlogged on inventory, because they're not clearing out. Like, they're clearing out Satellite Sam, Sex
Yeah.
Criminals, Odyssey, November, Casanova,
Again,
and some Adventure Man,
it's
hardcover
probably
Adventure Man.
it's
So it's
probably
not everything
it's
he's ever
probably
touched.
well, it's probably because, but they're doing it for him because he's in the news because he wrote Batman. You know,
Sure.
like
I mean,
that's a big deal. So yeah,
it's
you can
very possible, but it's also like, well, the paperbacks for these Casanovas came in, so we're going to clear out the hardcovers now. And
could
hey,
be.
look, they're all by Matt Fraction.
Yeah, could be,
So
could be.
because they rotate these. They're also doing a feature creator on Rick Remender, and he's no bigger or smaller than he's ever been in any other time. He's just
That's fair. That's fair.
he's always
That's true.
there
That's true.
looming.
Yeah.
And then they have the writer who wrote Pluto. Is that the name of the comic series, the manga series we did?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, he's the other feature creator. So it's just, to me, it seems more or less random. However, I'm guessing Fraction gets a lot of clicks right now.
Exactly. People are looking for his stuff.
But that being said, I can't imagine anyone first hearing of Fraction from Batman. I'm sure someone's out there, but
Here's the thing, though. There are people, and I don't know a lot of them, but there are people that have only read DC Comics. They've never read a Marvel, never read a creator-owned book. So it's possible, entirely possible. They've never read a Fraction comic until hey, who's this guy on Batman now? Where'd this guy come from? That sounds ridiculous to me, but I know those people exist.
Sure.
So, how big of a part of the comic reading population are they to be like a regular reader and I only read DC or I only read Marvel?
Well, I mean, that was
I don't
me
know,
a
but they
little
exist.
bit. I guess
They
when
exist, yeah.
Tynion got the reins from Tom King, I knew Tom King going in, but barely. I knew him from Vision,
Mhm.
and that was pretty much it. And then I did not know Tynion. And I looked him up, and I was like, oh, I mean, I'm familiar with him, but I wasn't like a Tynion reader.
Mhm.
Batman was really my first Tynion, and it's not a very good representation of Tynion's work.
Has a style. No,
Um,
it's because again, Batman's Batman. No matter what you do, Batman's always gonna, you're writing to the character versus writing to your story, your voice. So, but that exposure leads you to other things that he's done.
Sure.
So,
Well, and if you liked, the direction that he took it in, which was, Batman was gadgety, and there were lots of new villains and kind of wild horror elements.
I say
like
there's a body horror element to it. Yeah.
Yes. Once you see it, you can reverse engineer oh yeah, that is his style. Like his fingerprint is on it.
Mhm.
Let's say, you expect the same from Matt Fraction in his run. It's still going to be Batman,
Yeah.
but especially with the number one, he should be able to kind of mold it a little bit more in his style and his tone.
Yeah.
And frankly, his first issue didn't really show or tell me much.
No,
I didn't.
You're setting up the story. The big thing is that Tim Drake is back as Robin. That's the big thing that he's done so far. But yeah, no, it's exciting to, I'm excited to see, because I love Fraction as a writer, to see what he does when he's given the reins to Batman, because again, you give him someone like Hawkeye, no one knew Hawkeye, so he was given free reign. And one story I remember him saying was, when that book was when it was announced, when it was coming out, when he was given it initially, the only thing that they had in terms of representation in the MCU was the trailer for the first Avengers. That's the only thing that I had seen. And, in that scene, in that trailer, they used the scene where Hawkeye jumps off the building, and if you've seen Avengers, that's where he's at his last arrow. He jumps off the building, shoots back up, and then swings back through the window, right? But there's just that one action shot of Renner jumping off the building, turning and firing an arrow effectively back at the camera. That's all they had. And so that image is the first image of Hawkeye #1. Like, that's all they had of him falling, shooting an arrow back. And of course, in their issue, he falls and lands on a car, because that it sets the tone there. But that's all they had. Hawkeye wasn't someone that like they were clamoring for. And so he was given reign to really kind of flex with that and do something different.
Yeah,
you don't have that with Batman. So you don't have that with Batman. So I'm curious and I'm interested in knowing what he's done with some of those characters when he doesn't have the, I'm going to say shackles. That's a little harsher than I want to say, but when he doesn't have those kind of guardrails of like, this is the character, what he can do inside that space. And so, yeah, that first issue didn't blow me away either, but I know
that is the funny juxtaposition. The bigger the character, the smaller the sandbox, ironically.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And so what can you do with that? What can you add to the legacy of the character? And Fraction is one of those guys that I'm super excited to see. And so I was totally stoked when he was announced as the new writer. And so I'm glad to see that. And yeah, I want to see more from Elsa Charretier. I want to see the city beneath their feet. I want her to go back and do more and finish up Love Everlasting with Tom King. But so don't know what's going on in terms of scheduling wise and what else other projects she's working on. But she is someone that whenever she puts a book out, if her name's on it, I'm buying it, because I absolutely love her stuff. And I said that combination, not knowing what the combination was going to be going into November, just knowing that I liked Fraction's work and I liked what I had seen of Charretier, even though I hadn't read because she hadn't done, I had read The Infinite Loop, both volumes. It was cool. It was very good. But not having the experience with her as a long form interior artist, I wasn't sure what to get. I just knew I liked her style. And, after reading November, it was like, yes, no, now I need way more of it. So again, when she was then announced that she was doing an ongoing book with Tom King and she was going to be doing monthly serials, I was like, yes, let's do this. And we haven't gotten as much from her. And I just, I hope there's a chance in the future still to get more work from her, because I think she's so incredibly talented, and the way she does character, the way her line work and her storytelling, I think are awesome. I think her eye is fantastic. So I'm excited to get into this story.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Grab all 4 of November and meet us back here next week. It's super simple. I don't have to remember issue numbers or anything. Just read number 1, which is 80 pages. Honestly, yep. I think you're getting off a little easier than a normal 5-6 issue thing, which is often 120 pages.
Yeah, like I said, it's about 3.5 issues worth of material. So.
I think the thing that we talked about before we recorded that we did not mention here, so I think you should do a quick 30 seconds, cursive handwriting. The only thing that may slow you down to the pace of 120 pages.
Okay, yeah, I thought we may save this for when we actually see it, but yeah, so.
Oh, right.
But part of the lettering I mentioned a little bit from Kurt Ankeny is like, there are times when like it's actual cursive lettering, and it's possible that people listen to this that like never learned how to write cursive, and honestly, you're probably better for it if you weren't forced to do it in school. But there are times when it can be hard to read, and you have to focus a little more on it. But I think again, those are deliberate choices in terms of the fonts that he's using and when he's using it. So I think from a story standpoint, it makes sense. But there are definitely points when you might look at a word balloon and be like, oh wait, no, that's an I. No, that's an F. That's like there are some things you got to focus on. And and not just rely on context clues and what the word is, because you may not recognize the letter or the specific lettering choice that he's used for a certain piece of text or dialogue or something like that. So something to keep an eye on as you're going through, that I don't think it's intentionally hard to read, but I do think the font choice is intentional in terms of why he's delineating this in cursive, this in print, this in just like a handwritten kind of style, things like that. All those things are done with intention. So pay attention to it, but keep in mind that some of the cursive stuff might be hard to read for some of the audience. So just know that going in. Don't get frustrated with it.
Yeah. And, worst case scenario, it's a visual medium. Just rely on the pictures and keep going.
That is true. There's always that.
And we'll be here to discuss and possibly discern any inscrutable handwriting.
Yeah.
And I may need the help too, because it's not my favorite. Like anytime I get, a birthday card in the mail from an older woman, it's always old lady cursive. Everyone. They learned it 50, 60 years ago, and it's been evolving ever since. And
yeah.
I'm just like, I have to give it to my wife. I'm like, they're using like the thick, cheap pens, and it never leaves the page. It's just a cluster of little loops and connected things. Yeah,
cluster of what you're pretty certain are letters, but you're not quite certain if they're words, right?
Yeah. Sometimes the dots are even like technically connected.
No, I have a problem with that. I don't write in cursive, but I use a lot of cursive techniques in the way that I write, which makes it illegible to most people. So if I have to write anything that I know someone else has to read, I try and go to a completely different font. Like I try to write basically like in all caps. And even then, if I go too quickly, letters run together and I look at it and be like, well, that's illegible. So I understand from that standpoint, but again, just something to keep in mind if you're not familiar with that style of writing, that style of font, that it does appear and is utilized heavily throughout November. So just keep that in mind. And again, don't get frustrated with it if you look at it and you're like, I don't know what that says. Just, rely on context clues, figure it out, and just stick with it because the story is working.
Yes. All right. Well, we will see you next week with November Volume 1.
Peace.